What would it take to arouse your life, to experience more connection, more pleasure, more realness, in and outside of the bedroom? I'm August McLaughlin, and this is Girl Boner Radio.
There are ways where the intensity and the discomfort were calling me into such an exquisite degree of presence. Like my mind could be nowhere else. And there's my breath and there's my body. I was absolutely accessing altered states of consciousness. My body was having this rigorous physical experience, and my mind and my spirit and my heart were just flying and soaring.
Darshana Avila told me that one of the most formative imprints that she got early on is something she was told about later. It involved her dad,
who, it's probably worth noting, was like a pretty mainstreamed hippie by the time I was born.
He described it like this. 2-week-old Darshana was lying on his chest in the bathtub.
And he got a download about who I would be and how I would be. And of the many things that might have been part of that, the only one that I actually have a clear memory of is that he said I was going to have a really strong connection to my sexuality. You know, there's been some things to unpack around that.
Largely because of when he described these things. She recalls conversations about it all in her teens. Looking back, Darshana told me she sees both this level of openness from her dad that felt fun and liberating around sexuality, and a, quote, fair amount of poor boundaries and a lack of discernment on his part in terms of what was truly age and relationship appropriate. And when Darshana was in her 20s, he told her he had cheated on her mom. Because of these things, Darshana said she held information that she felt she shouldn't. She did enjoy getting other information about sex, though, the kind she discovered on her own.
I was precocious and curious and liked to experiment and explore. And so I have memories probably starting at around like 7 or 8 years old of exploring my body and my friends' bodies, like beyond just the like playing with the dolls and stuff like that, like really being, you know, with ourselves and each other and getting curious about our genitals and getting curious about how things felt. It all felt very innocent. It wasn't even like, oh, we're trying to simulate sex. It was more, wow, like my body and your body and what's this like? And there was just something precious and innocent about those explorations.
For a while, that innocence she experienced with bodies just being bodies stayed with her. But negative ideas seeped in too.
Even though my parents, in one regard, I could say like they helped to foster that innocence, there started being comments about my weight and my eating when I began to like hit double digits and like it wasn't cute anymore to have the baby fat. And my mother was a recovered anorexic and had a lot of ideas around like vanity and appearance. And so it started from there for me, where I became self-conscious of the shape and size of my body. And then once I hit puberty and I was like 13, I started to bleed and it all started to happen. I totally remember padded bras because I felt self-conscious that my breasts were too small. A lot of self-consciousness that I needed my body to be shaped a certain way, to be sized a certain way in order to be seen as attractive, in order to be desired.
She said that those ideas came from many different directions.
It was my parents' comments about my weight and my appearance. It was reading all the like teeny bopper magazines and just growing up in a like suburban middle class environment where there was a lot of attention and energy put on image.
But none of that kept her from sexual exploration.
There was a lot of that going on. So back to the I was always precocious.
Without having a word for it then, Darshana said she's also always been queer.
I was sexually experimenting and exploring probably from about 12, 13 onward, very consistently with both guys and girls.
During high school, she had a relationship with one of her best friends.
I was the cat sitter for my next door neighbor who traveled on business a lot. And so she and I would steal porn videos out of my dad's closet and go over to my neighbors where I was plausible deniability. I'm not doing anything, I'm cat sitting. And we would watch porn and mess around with each other and explore each other's bodies and have full blown sexual experiences, girl to girl, while also dating guys and progressively exploring more.
She liked how that felt. Not just the actual exploring, but her confidence about it.
I think I felt early on the power of it, the attention that I could command by being more open and more confident in my sexuality. And it was a bit of an interesting dichotomy because I was also really smart and a really good student.
Two things that culturally we don't often pair together, especially for a girl. She's smart or into sex, not both.
I kind of felt like I was getting away with something by being both. I could get the attention of the boys and be seen as like fun and cool, but that I was also like on the straight and narrow. And I thought that I was flying under the radar until I got suspended from high school because I got caught engaged in a sexual act on school grounds. And that was a really big deal because all of a sudden I wasn't flying under the radar.
Everyone seemed to know about it.
I remember my mother's voice screaming through the telephone when the dean called her and she had to come pick me up. Every teacher, every student in my school of almost 4,000 people had heard the gossip. This happened just before my 16th birthday.
Quite a time to learn firsthand about slut shaming.
And what it is to choose to say, hey, this was something I was doing out of pleasure. It felt good to me. And so I might have felt remorse about my choice of where and when I was engaging, but I didn't feel shame about what I was doing. I was there because I wanted to be.
Her activisty self felt emboldened by it, she said. Some years later, at 22, Darshana married a man she had known for 5 months.
And it was total puppy love and not the worst thing I've ever done as far as mistakes that one could make go, but also not necessarily shocking that it didn't go the distance.
It did go for 6 years.
Part of what ended the marriage was I was having a massive spiritual awakening. And it was really, really clear that the direction that my heart and soul wanted to follow in life just did not line up with what my ex-husband was up for. We just had, grown apart, truly.
Once the relationship ended, she started a new kind of exploration, very different from the vanilla, non-kinky sex she had with her ex.
There was a string of people that I connected with who were very kinky, assertive, creative lovers.
Some of the ways Darshana delved into kink were far from ideal, but they did shed light on desires that she had not tapped into yet.
I remember dating this one guy who just, it was the stuff that frankly you don't have to be very skilled to do, and thus a lot of people do harm with, the hair pulling and the throat gripping and the ass smacking and just that flavor started to come in without really negotiating it or talking about it.
Throat grabbing in particular can be dangerous without the right precautions. But still,
I liked it. I was oh, this is actually thrilling for me. I like the objectification. I like the power dynamics. I like the energy that this gives rise to.
So that teed off more intentional exploration. And that's when the spiritual work she'd been doing in her life, mostly through a yogic framework, she said, and the sex she was exploring came together.
Something in me got really curious about here are these two things going on at the same time: sexual awakening, spiritual awakening. Why are most of the narratives that I've heard about them that these things have to be separate from each other? I was initiated in a very classical yogic lineage that was so anti-sex. Like, yeah, you do all these crazy, cool, fun postures with your body, but modesty and abstinence were the things that were preached, basically. Obviously, that wasn't the life I was living, but that certainly was among the teachings that I was being exposed to.
Meanwhile, she felt like something was missing from sex.
Some of that included like dating, with a degree of intention, but also like one night stands and, just like meeting somebody while out and having a vibe with them. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot of sacredness and depth being brought to those encounters, but something in me wanted it. Something in me wanted the beautiful sacredness of my spiritual life and the fabulous profanity of my sexual life to actually coexist. It didn't take too long for that curiosity of, can these things coexist, to lead me to Tantra,
It was the kind known as Neo-Tantra.
which is like a very westernized and sex focused version of Tantra, which is a phenomenal body of esoteric wisdom that in actuality has a very, very small portion of it that tends to sexual practices. But, we in the West, we like to go for the sensational stuff.
Through that, she met someone.
Who I was utterly smitten with. And it turned out that he was similarly smitten with me.
They had a 6-month whirlwind relationship.
Where we were exploring all these tantric practices together. I was having sexual experiences of the sort that, like, this was the stuff that dreams were made of for me at that point in time. Like the level of consciousness and intentionality and focus and care.
None of the quick, casual experiences she'd had before.
Like this was the complete antithesis to that, of like these long lovemaking sessions and exploring slow sex, soft cock intercourse, lingam massage, yoni massage. So that got me to recognize like that there is so much more, even to genitally focused sex, that could be happening that I had ever known.
Darshana spent the next several years learning from different tantric teachers, communities, lovers, and partners from around the world.
And the first time that this then dovetailed with kink was on an island in Thailand. Yeah, this is my life.
Yeah, feel free to join me in living vicariously. So Darshana and a bunch of other sexuality professionals and tantra folks, they rented this property together to dive deeply into practicing with each other and themselves.
It's a small community. And there's this guy on the island who is apparently really good with rope.
Something Darshana had been intrigued by.
We finally meet, and I am just chomping at the bit to have an experience. Like everything in me, all my little toe dips into different iterations of kink in the years prior, like had been building and building and building. And then here's this guy in this paradise island in a very like conscious sexuality community who also brings this kink element to it.
He offered these multi-hour ritual sessions. And that is where Darshana had her first shibari experience. Shibari is a Japanese style of rope bondage. It involves usually really artistic ways of tying someone up or being tied up, and sometimes suspension.
I was in a little like bungalow in a jungle. So there's like fresh air coming through and the sounds of the jungle around me. I remember having a little tea ceremony and just easing in this beautiful, gentle way, honoring what a sacred thing it is to engage with our bodies, to engage with the rope.
The session started with the man binding parts of her body to restrict movement and went on from there. Darshana said it was very meditative and sexual, and all of it was based on desires that she shared with him beforehand.
There is this heightened sensation in the body. Rope it doesn't have to be intrinsically painful and can actually even be very pleasurable. You could have combinations of the two, and that was what I was experiencing. There are ways where the intensity and the discomfort were calling me into such an exquisite degree of presence Like my mind could be nowhere else. And any kind of chatter or distraction, it's just gone. And there's my breath, and there's my body, and there's me and my rope top or my rigger. I was absolutely accessing altered states of consciousness. My body was having this rigorous physical experience, and my mind and my spirit and my heart were just flying and soaring.
Then the session took a turn. It got intense in ways Darshana could not have imagined.
I blacked out at the end of the session.
That definitely was not supposed to happen.
A rope kind of came across my throat at an angle that wasn't such a safe thing. And so here I am, first time ever in rope, hours into this journey. It is absolutely one of the most exquisite things I've ever experienced in my life, transcendent. And then I wake up on the floor being cut out of my rope, and I'm hysterical, and he's holding me and like doing all the right things on the other side of that. And my body is bruised. There was a lot of bruising because of the angle that I fell at.
It was a dangerous situation she had been in, and she had been hurt. She could have been hurt worse. Darshana does not advocate for those things, of course. How she felt about parts of it, though, surprised her afterwards.
After getting over the initial shock, in the days that followed, I would like look at myself in the mirror and I would see these marks and feel proud and feel excited. And then it was like, well, what does this even mean?
A couple of years later in the US, another practitioner would answer that question.
We had a rope session, and then he offered to give me an experience with a single tail whip. And I jumped at it. I was like, yes, like I want to know what this is like.
So he went at it, using the whip on her.
And once again, here I am experiencing this incredibly intense sensation in my body, things that many, many people would very understandably fear or absolutely say no to. And I'm being lit up.
The session ends.
And we're in the come down. He turns to me, he's like, Darshana, you are such a masochist. Do you know this about yourself? And it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh, I guess I am. And it's wild how something that like there's so much evidence right in front of me, but because it's an edgy thing, there's a lot of taboo around this. Or for me, I would say at that point in time, not only taboo, I was more newly forging connections with other kinksters. So I was getting to know my masochism, and then I got to know my sadism.
Masochism meaning she derives sexual gratification from being subjected to physical pain, and that she can transmute pain into pleasure. Sadism meaning she gets off on inflicting pain on someone else during play. All of this safely and consensually. If you would like to explore rope play, it's the perfect time to check out the Bondage and Restraints collection at The Pleasure Chest. It features their best-selling BDSM gear, including vegan leather bondage straps. They will also keep you on the cutting edge of BDSM restraints with comfy sex cuffs, kinky collars, under-bed restraints, and beginning to advanced bondage toys. Check it all out and stock up on lube while you're at it at thepleasurechest.com. Again, that's The Pleasure Chest at thepleasurechest.com. Since those experiences, Darshana has cultivated a career in sex work as a certified somatic experiencing practitioner and sexological body worker. She calls herself an erotic wholeness guide, and her work has helped reveal another one of her kink identities as a switch, meaning she sometimes gets off on being the dominant partner and other times on being submissive.
If you are the one holding space and creating experiences for your clients of these kind of paid transactional sexual kinds, you are at a minimum the top, right? Like you're the doer and you're the one who's like directing the container. I also started stepping into dominance and directiveness and being in positions where clients who I had built rapport with would start to ask for increasingly more submissive experiences for themselves or bottoming experiences for themselves.
A particular experience in which Darshana was the paying client really illuminated her switchness. It played out like this.
I walk in to an incredibly well-provisioned dungeon. My male submissive is in a cage and he is blindfolded and he is invited out of his cage with the blindfold on and made to crawl and find and feel his way around the space without eyesight. And I'm silent. He doesn't know where I am. And there's a long table in the space. And at some point in time, I see him crawling toward one end of where he could fit himself between the table legs. And so I place myself at the other end. The predator in me was like, oh, my prey is walking right into my trap. And it was so intoxicating because I caught him and I pulled him out and then proceeded to like kick, not all that hard, but like kind of like with my feet, paw and kick at him and start saying all sorts of terrible things about how awful men can be. And I put him up on a St. Andrew's cross and flogged him quite mercilessly. It was, a beautiful consensual experience. I keep feeling the need to emphasize that because I don't want anyone, who is unfamiliar to think that this is an abusive dynamic. It was thrilling for the both of us. It was so clear in his posture and in his energy as he dropped into what is referred to as subspace and really got into that psychic and energetic space that a submissive can reach, altered states of consciousness. And we got to really process something together. He is a very conscious, awake, and aware man who feels just as strongly as I do about the ills and the harms of the patriarchy. And so we got to work this thing together in such a visceral, powerful way. And then do aftercare and curl up in bed and snuggle and, come down together. And this is someone who he himself is also a switch. And so we have had the opportunity to play across all these roles with each other in different roles. And there's a lot of rapport there and a lot of trust and safety.
If you're curious about broadening your own sexual horizons or discovering different aspects of your identity in kink or sex in general, Darshana offered this.
The thing that I want to say is all of us were a beginner at one point in time. All of us were new and there was some spark of curiosity that led us to want to explore, right? And so I find that, and I've had this experience myself, like it can feel very intimidating and overwhelming when you're more newly exploring, whether that's there's a fetish or a kink you want to learn more about, or there's a community that you would like to become a part of. And I say this as someone who's also an introvert and doesn't love being in spaces with tons of people. And so, going to like events can feel a little daunting on my nervous system, like to have to make small talk and da 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 da. But what I want anyone who is curious and wants to explore to know is to just remember that everybody had to start somewhere. There's nothing wrong with being new. It's a beautiful thing to come with beginner's mind and an earnest desire to explore. And there are so many amazing resources that exist. Like there's communities online, there's educators who teach online, there's books galore. Please don't learn from just porn alone. I mean, there's decent porn out there, but it's porn, it's entertainment. If what you seek is education and community, like it's there, and take that little step, that toe dipping into the pool in whatever way feels accessible to you.
If you'd like to work with Darshana as you take those steps, you can.
There are so many ways to heal and explore and grow in your capacity for pleasure and confidence in your erotic expression and in your sexual identity and in your relationship skills, all that. And my offerings in particular serve women and non-binary AFAB folks. I have a free online community where you can come and get resources and connect with other like-minded souls and delve into what it is to explore your erotic nature in a really embodied, trauma-informed, social justice-oriented way. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I'm here for. So anybody who is into that, please come hang out with me.
Learn more by visiting darshanaavila.com. Find Darshana on YouTube at Darshana-Avila. If you are enjoying Girl Boner Radio, or if it's your first time listening and you appreciated this episode, I would so love it if you would post a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That's the purple iPhone app or Spotify. Or send a link to all of your friends. Okay, at least one or two. Thanks so much for listening.